They told you that abundance was something earned through struggle and effort. And what if I tell you that the real wealth of life begins not in the outside world, but within the hidden chambers of your imagination, where unseen seeds quietly germinate, waiting only for your conscious attention to awaken them? This is how it unfolds. The moment you begin to see that every thought, every whispered desire, every fleeting image in your mind is a seed with the potential to manifest into reality. This is where the illusion deepens, because most of what you were taught about hard work obscures the deeper truth that imagination precedes form. This is why it matters, for the invisible rules of creation are operating constantly, shaping circumstances far beyond your current awareness. This is the turning point where realization dawns, and you begin to perceive that your consciousness is not a passive observer, but the fertile ground from which every outcome grows. This is how freedom announces itself. For once you understand this principle, the fear of lack dissolves into a horizon of possibility. This is why circumstances lose power, because no external event can dictate the harvest if the seed has been sown and nurtured in imagination. This is how destiny is rewritten, quietly and deliberately, in the theater of the mind where feelings, attention, and belief orchestrate the unfolding of every experience. This is how the blueprint of abundance is laid, where seed time is the act of conscious creation and harvest is the inevitable flowering of what has been assumed to be real. This is where the inner alchemy begins, transforming invisible thoughts into tangible outcomes. This is why patience becomes sacred, because the seed must mature in the unseen before it manifests in form. This is how your mental landscape becomes a field of miracles, each thought fertilized by faith and focus. This is the opening to a journey where every segment of life is a chapter of conscious creation. This is the whisper of possibility calling you to step beyond conventional thinking. This is the quiet revelation that abundance is not pursued, but awakened. This is how the first spark ignites, and the story of seed time and harvest begins in earnest. This is how the path unfolds, and the viewer stands on the edge of a revelation that will forever change the way they see life. This is the beginning of the blueprint for true abundance, where every subsequent step builds upon the first conscious seed planted in imagination. Can you imagine a world where the act of planting extends far beyond the soil beneath your feet? This is how it begins, with the recognition that every physical seed you place in the earth mirrors a spiritual seed sown within your consciousness. This is where perception shifts, because what appears to be a simple agricultural cycle is in truth a profound metaphor for creation itself. This is why it matters. As the farmer waters the soil and tends the sprouts, so too must you nurture the mental images and assumptions that will yield your harvest. This is the turning point. For while most labor in vain, believing effort alone produces results, the true force is invisible, existing in your imagination first. This is how insight emerges, revealing that seed time is both literal and symbolic, a dual layer of understanding that unlocks creative power. This is why awareness becomes crucial, because only by recognizing the spiritual layer can you align your thoughts and emotions with the desired outcome. This is how the mind mirrors nature, each carefully conceived thought a potential sprout of abundance. This is how patience gains meaning, for just as the soil requires time and care, so does consciousness need persistence and focus. This is the subtle shift, where the eyes see not only with sight, but with inner knowing. This is why internal discipline matters, because weeds of doubt and fear must be cleared to allow the seed of desire to flourish. This is the hidden rhythm of life, where imagination sets the stage for manifestation and the outer world follows. This is the quiet revelation that every visible outcome had its genesis in an unseen mental act of planting. This is how confidence grows, as understanding replaces struggle with strategic inner cultivation. This is why alignment becomes a superpower, directing energy where it naturally multiplies. This is the unfolding principle, where every action and thought is an opportunity to sow deliberately. This is how consciousness becomes fertile, each idea carefully selected and nourished. This is the secret pathway from seed time to harvest, where the spiritual dimension informs and accelerates the physical. This is the moment where the viewer begins to perceive creation as a conscious, participatory act, rather than a random series of events. This is the bridge between what is seen and what is imagined, and this is the unveiling of the first key to Neville's blueprint for abundance. Picture for a moment the infinite landscape of your mind. This is how it unfolds, where every desire, every dream, every whispered hope is first planted as a delicate seed waiting for your attention. This is where the unseen becomes the architect of reality, because imagination is the original soil from which all experiences grow. This is why it matters, as the clarity and vividness of your imagined scenes dictate the strength and direction of the harvest to come. This is the turning point, where you recognize that no external circumstance has the power to shape your life until it is first imagined within. This is how awareness deepens, for each thought carries a magnetic force, attracting the circumstances that mirror its essence. This is where the blueprint solidifies, revealing that your inner world is not a reflection, but the foundation of every external manifestation. This is why focus becomes sacred, as sustained attention on a chosen scene ensures its growth and eventual flowering. This is the revelation of the law, that imagination is more than fantasy. It is the active seed of creation. This is how the veil lifts, showing that feelings imbued into thoughts act as fertilizer, accelerating the development of your desired reality. This is the subtle power at play, where the mind quietly orchestrates outcomes without interference from doubt or disbelief. This is why the internal rehearsal of desires is paramount, because every detail experienced in imagination strengthens the probability of its physical arrival. This is how alignment manifests, bridging the inner with the outer through the continuous act of conscious imagining. This is the awakening of personal responsibility, where you understand that your future is not a product of luck, but of deliberate mental cultivation. This is the secret rhythm, where imagination, feeling, and belief converge to form the invisible matrix of creation. This is how mastery begins. Each mental seed sown with intention and nourished with unwavering attention. This is why abundance becomes inevitable, as the mind has already orchestrated the harvest before it touches the material world. This is how the viewer begins to feel the immense power of their inner creative force. And this is the moment when imagination ceases to be mere fantasy and transforms into the fertile seed of all that is to come. Now consider this. Your consciousness is more than awareness. This is how it unfolds. It is the fertile soil in which the seeds of imagination are planted. This is where transformation begins, because the quality of your inner soil determines the strength, speed, and resilience of every harvest. This is why it matters, as neglected or distracted consciousness produces weak sprouts that struggle to survive. This is the turning point, for once you see yourself as the cultivator of your own mind, every thought becomes a deliberate act of creation. This is how insight emerges, revealing that belief, expectation, and emotional alignment are the nutrients that nourish mental seeds. This is why focus becomes the irrigation system, channeling life-giving energy toward what you wish to see flourish. This is the subtle yet profound truth, that negative thoughts are like weeds, choking growth and diverting energy away from the desired harvest. This is how discipline takes form, through the careful observation and redirection of attention. This is where mastery begins, as you learn to prune, weed, and enrich your inner landscape with conscious intention. This is why emotional resonance matters, because feelings saturate the soil, making it more receptive to the seeds of desire. This is how the invisible work manifests visibly. For a well-tended consciousness produces results seemingly effortlessly. This is the quiet revelation, that patience and persistence in mental cultivation outweigh frantic action in the outer world. This is how resilience is born, as the mind becomes a stable ecosystem where abundance can thrive uninterrupted. This is the unfolding of the blueprint, where every act of imagination finds fertile ground to grow into tangible reality. This is why alignment becomes the natural law, harmonizing thought, feeling, and expectation into a single force. This is how the viewer begins to perceive their mind as both field and farmer simultaneously. And this is the moment where consciousness is recognized, not merely as awareness, but as the living, breathing soil of creation itself. Suppose you discover that reality bends not to struggle or circumstance, but to the assumptions you hold. This is how it unfolds. As Neville's law of assumption reveals that what you assume to be true in your inner world inevitably becomes your outer experience. This is where perception shifts, for the mind cannot distinguish between imagined certainty and physical fact when the feeling is fully realized. This is why it matters. Because assuming the wish fulfilled plants the most potent seed imaginable, one that attracts its harvest with unerring precision. This is the turning point, where belief ceases to be passive and becomes an active force, directing events and people toward your imagined outcome. This is how clarity emerges, showing that consistent assumptions replace doubt, uncertainty, and scattered effort. This is the subtle power of alignment, where thought, feeling, and imagination converge to form a magnetic field that pulls reality toward your inner vision. This is where focus gains new meaning, as the mind no longer drifts in randomness but channels energy toward deliberate creation. This is how patience transforms, as you understand that once a seed is planted in assumption, its growth is inevitable, regardless of external appearances. This is why awareness is key. Noticing every small confirmation of your assumption strengthens the magnetic pull of your harvest. This is how mastery is achieved, through the conscious, sustained cultivation of belief, expectation, and feeling. This is the revelation, that by assuming the reality of your desire, you become the unseen architect of your life. This is why internal consistency matters, as contradictions dilute the power of assumption and delay manifestation. This is how timing aligns, for the harvest always ripens according to the inner assumption, not according to external pressure. This is the unfolding blueprint, where every assumed thought becomes a planted seed, and every feeling is water nourishing its growth. This is the moment the viewer begins to understand the simplicity and elegance of creation. This is how the law of assumption becomes the guiding principle for every intentional act. And this is the threshold where imagination, assumption, and feeling converge to orchestrate the harvest that awaits. Envision a world where everything unfolds at its perfect moment. This is how it begins. As the principle of seed time reminds us that no seed reaches harvest before its time. This is where awareness deepens, because patience is not idle, waiting, but an active engagement with the invisible growth taking place within. This is why it matters. For every mental seed requires gestation in consciousness before it manifests externally. This is the turning point, where you realize that rushing or forcing outcomes interrupts the natural rhythm of creation. This is how trust emerges, a quiet confidence that the harvest is developing unseen, yet inevitably. This is why persistence is essential, as consistent attention and feeling maintain the fertile conditions for manifestation. This is where insight grows, understanding that impatience often stems from a misalignment between inner assumption and outer evidence. This is the subtle mastery of timing, knowing that the unseen world moves according to inner laws, not external schedules. This is how faith strengthens, as you witness early signs, confirmations, and synchronicities that assure the seed is alive. This is why emotional equilibrium matters, as fluctuating doubt slows growth and disperses creative energy. This is the moment when inner discipline and calm become your allies, guiding the mind to maintain focus without interference. This is how resilience is forged, nurturing the seed through perceived delays and invisible development. This is the unfolding rhythm, where patience becomes a vehicle for accelerated manifestation. This is why surrender complements action, as allowing the seed to mature internally ensures its eventual external flowering. This is how the viewer begins to understand that timing is always precise, even when unseen. This is the quiet revelation that waiting is itself a creative act. This is how the blueprint deepens, merging patience, alignment, and assumption into a cohesive force. And this is the step where timing and patience become the trusted companions of conscious creation. Think of the moment when every thought you nurture becomes a droplet of life for your imagined desire. This is how it unfolds, as sustained attention acts like water, penetrating the soil of consciousness and encouraging the seed to grow strong and vibrant. This is where focus transforms into a creative ritual, because without deliberate observation and energy, even the most vivid mental images fade into insignificance. This is why it matters. For the harvest is never accidental. It requires consistent mental irrigation. This is the turning point, where you see that attention, more than effort or struggle, determines the vigor and speed of manifestation. This is how alignment emerges. Each repeated focus reinforcing the assumption that your desire is already fulfilled. This is why emotional engagement enhances growth, as feeling saturates the seed with the essential energy for its transformation. This is the subtle power at work, where even brief moments of distraction can stunt growth, while focused intervals accelerate it exponentially. This is where mastery begins, learning to direct attention with precision, nurturing imagination like a gardener tending delicate sprouts. This is why mental discipline matters, shaping the inner landscape to support sustained creative momentum. This is how results become inevitable. As repeated visualization and focus deepen the inner reality, forming a magnetic blueprint for the external world. This is where insight crystallizes, revealing that attention is not passive observation, but active cultivation. This is how consistency strengthens belief. Each moment of focused awareness affirming the reality of your desired outcome. This is why patience and attention are inseparable, as uninterrupted energy allows the invisible seed to mature fully. This is how the viewer begins to see the symphony of consciousness, where thought, feeling, and attention collaborate. This is the unveiling of creative power, showing that small, repeated acts of mental focus accumulate into monumental harvests. This is the turning of intention into reality, each droplet of attention feeding the invisible root system. This is how sustained care ensures abundance, and this is the principle by which imagination becomes unstoppable, fertile, and destined to manifest. Ask yourself what happens when a thought is not merely imagined but fully felt. This is how it unfolds, as feelings act like sunlight and warmth, energizing the seed of desire planted in your consciousness. This is where understanding deepens, because a thought without feeling lacks the vibrational intensity to influence the outer world. This is why it matters, for the emotional charge you attach to imagination determines the speed, clarity, and fidelity of your harvest. This is the turning point, where the mind and heart synchronize to create a potent magnet for manifestation. This is how subtle power flows, as every sensation of fulfillment amplifies the unseen seed's growth. This is where mastery emerges, learning to cultivate emotions that mirror the reality you wish to inhabit. This is why internal congruence is essential, as conflicting feelings weaken the magnetic field and stunt progress. This is the quiet revelation that mental rehearsal alone is incomplete without the emotional current that brings it to life. This is how resonance shapes reality, connecting inner assumption to outer manifestation. This is where patience transforms into ecstatic anticipation, feeling the end before it physically exists. This is why the act of sensing abundance now accelerates the natural rhythm of harvest. This is how clarity sharpens, revealing that emotional investment is the invisible fertilizer nurturing your seeds. This is where alignment becomes tangible, as emotion harmonizes with focus and assumption to create unstoppable creative force. This is how subtle evidence begins to appear, each synchronicity and small manifestation affirming the internal work. This is the opening to deep trust, knowing the inner emotional field is actively shaping outer reality. This is why attention to feeling is as critical as attention to thought. This is how the viewer begins to realize that joy, gratitude, and certainty are not just emotional states, but essential tools of creation. This is the moment when feeling and imagination fuse to form a living seed. And this is how the blueprint for abundance gains its most vital energy, transforming desire into inevitable reality. Consider the possibility that every doubt, hesitation, or conflicting belief acts like a hidden weed in your mental garden. This is how it unfolds, as contradictory thoughts drain energy from the seeds you have planted. This is where clarity emerges, revealing that inner opposition can silently sabotage even the most vivid imaginings. This is why it matters, because without removing mental contradictions, the harvest slows, falters, or fails to appear. This is the turning point, when you begin to monitor your inner dialogue and consciously replace doubt with unwavering assumption. This is how mastery strengthens, as attention and feeling are redirected to reinforce the imagined reality rather than undermine it. This is why focus becomes sacred, each thought carefully aligned with the vision you intend to manifest. This is where subtle awareness flourishes, noticing mental patterns that oppose desire before they gain power. This is how mental discipline transforms imagination into an unshakable force. This is why persistence matters. Consistently choosing thoughts that match the end you wish to see. This is the quiet revelation that inner resistance is always optional, subject to conscious intervention. This is how alignment solidifies, as belief, feeling, and thought move in concert without friction. This is why timing and patience gain potency, free from interruptions of self-doubt. This is how subconscious barriers are dissolved, leaving fertile soil ready for growth. This is where attention becomes the gardener, actively pulling weeds before they choke the seed. This is how momentum builds, as every congruent thought strengthens the unseen foundation of reality. This is why inner vigilance is essential, because unattended contradictions multiply silently. This is how the viewer begins to grasp the hidden work behind effortless manifestation. This is the step where inner clarity ensures that imagination and feeling remain undiluted. And this is how the path from seed time to harvest is cleared, allowing abundance to unfold without interference. Picture for a moment the vivid scene of your desire already fulfilled. This is how it unfolds, as visualization transforms abstract wishes into concrete mental movies that the subconscious mind begins to accept as reality. This is where clarity deepens, because the more detailed and sensory-rich the imagination, the stronger the magnetic pull toward manifestation. This is why it matters, for mental images act as the blueprint from which external circumstances eventually arise. This is the turning point, where simple imagining becomes a deliberate, immersive rehearsal of the life you wish to inhabit. This is how mastery emerges, learning to engage sight, sound, touch, emotion, and even internal dialogue to create a fully alive mental experience. This is why repetition enhances power, as recurring visualization reinforces assumption and aligns feeling with thought. This is where subtle energy flows, shaping inner consciousness to mirror the desired outcome. This is how consistency matters. Maintaining daily mental engagement ensures that the seed remains nourished and growing. This is the quiet revelation that imagination alone is insufficient without feeling and persistent attention. This is how alignment solidifies, bridging inner perception with outer realization. This is why patience gains context, as visualization sets the stage for harvest even when no physical evidence is yet apparent. This is how subconscious conditioning shifts, gradually rewriting expectations and removing resistance. This is the subtle power of immersive rehearsal, making the unseen inevitable. This is where confidence blossoms, knowing that repeated inner experience guarantees eventual external form. This is how focus becomes an instrument of creation, each scene carefully crafted and imbued with emotion. This is why small details matter, as every nuance amplifies the magnetic field of assumption. This is how the viewer begins to see the practicality of Neville's method, where imagination is not fantasy, but strategic cultivation. And this is the moment when visualization becomes the primary tool for transforming thought into tangible harvest. Now consider this. The words you repeat silently or aloud are only vessels. This is how it unfolds. For affirmations without vivid imagination often float on the surface of consciousness, producing little tangible change. This is where understanding deepens, as Neville emphasizes that imagination, fully felt and experienced, is the true seed of creation. This is why it matters, because spoken phrases alone cannot generate the emotional and vibrational energy necessary to influence reality. This is the turning point, when you recognize that imagining the end and feeling it internally surpasses any external repetition. This is how subtle mastery emerges, as the mind begins to differentiate between shallow statements and fully lived mental experiences. This is why alignment becomes critical. Matching every imagined scenario with consistent feeling ensures the seed's vitality. This is where power consolidates, concentrating mental energy on a single, cohesive vision, rather than dispersing it through disconnected affirmations. This is how the unseen blueprint strengthens, making the eventual harvest more inevitable and precise. This is why attention to sensory detail matters. Seeing, hearing, and feeling the desired outcome embeds it deeply into consciousness. This is where trust grows, knowing that lived imagination carries the weight of reality even before physical evidence appears. This is the subtle revelation that imagination is the action and feeling is the fuel, whereas affirmation alone is often inert. This is how momentum builds, repeated immersive experiences magnetizing circumstances into alignment. This is why emotional congruence is essential, ensuring that every imagined scene resonates authentically within. This is how discipline shapes creativity, channeling imagination intentionally rather than letting it drift randomly. This is where evidence begins to emerge, small signs confirming that internal work is taking root. This is how the viewer begins to distinguish between mere words and powerful imaginative acts. And this is the step where imagination solidifies as the primary engine of Neville's blueprint, leaving affirmation as a secondary support rather than the main tool. Can you imagine a reality where every external event is a reflection of what has already ripened within? This is how it unfolds, as the true harvest begins in the fertile soil of consciousness before it manifests in the physical world. This is where awareness deepens, showing that your outer circumstances are the mirror, not the origin. This is why it matters, because understanding this flips the perspective from chasing outcomes to cultivating inner states. This is the turning point, where patience and faith take on new significance, as internal maturity dictates the timing of external appearances. This is how subtle power operates, each imagined and felt scene already shaping what will soon be tangible. This is where alignment becomes crucial, as congruent thoughts, feelings, and assumptions create a clear, unimpeded path for manifestation. This is why attention to inner evidence matters. Small, intuitive nudges signal the progress of the unseen harvest. This is the quiet mastery, recognizing that the seed's development is continuous even when no physical proof is present. This is how confidence grows, as internal results assure the inevitability of the outer manifestation. This is where understanding the invisible rhythm reinforces trust, teaching that the inner state is always ahead of form. This is how energy consolidates, focusing momentum on what has been internally assumed. This is why emotional engagement sustains growth, as feelings signal readiness and vitality. This is the subtle revelation that the moment the mind and heart fully accept the reality of the desire, the harvest is already underway. This is how internal victory precedes outer success. This is where the blueprint unfolds seamlessly, showing that consciousness is the birthplace of abundance. This is why the viewer begins to see the harvest as a process already in motion within, and this is the moment when the invisible becomes the guiding reality, ensuring that every subsequent step magnifies the seeds already planted in the inner world. Now consider this. Life constantly offers subtle confirmations of what is unfolding within. This is how it unfolds, as synchronicities, unexpected opportunities, and fleeting insights signal the progress of your mental seeds. This is where perception sharpens, because recognizing these small signs reinforces the belief that the harvest is inevitable. This is why it matters, for without noticing these cues, impatience and doubt can creep in and disrupt the internal momentum. This is the turning point, where the observer begins to see the invisible threads connecting imagination to reality. This is how subtle mastery develops, learning to interpret daily events as messages from the unfolding blueprint. This is why awareness is crucial, as even the smallest confirmation strengthens the alignment of thought, feeling, and assumption. This is where trust solidifies, each nudge and synchronicity reinforcing the certainty of eventual manifestation. This is how patience gains power, showing that unseen processes are active even when results are not yet visible. This is why attention to detail matters, because minor alignments often precede major transformations. This is how internal consistency reflects in external events, every congruent thought amplifying the probability of harvest. This is where confidence blooms, as recognition of evidence nurtures faith and eliminates doubt. This is why emotional resonance becomes a tool. Feeling gratitude for small signs accelerates manifestation. This is the subtle revelation that the universe mirrors your inner state almost immediately in microcosmic ways. This is how focus sharpens, reinforcing your chosen outcome through repeated acknowledgement of evidence. This is why every moment holds potential, as even mundane experiences contain proof of unseen development. This is how the viewer begins to perceive reality as a responsive canvas rather than random chaos. This is the step where internal and external worlds begin to sync. And this is the moment when everyday life transforms into a continuous confirmation of the seeds planted in imagination. Picture for a moment the hidden labor that precedes every visible result. This is how it unfolds. As the growth of your desires occurs silently in the unseen realms of consciousness, long before any external manifestation appears. This is where understanding deepens, because the most important work is not measured by effort or visible progress, but by inner alignment and sustained attention. This is why it matters, for the unseen preparation determines the strength, resilience, and precision of the eventual harvest. This is the turning point, where you realize that patience is an active engagement with the invisible process rather than idle waiting. This is how subtle mastery emerges, learning to cultivate mental clarity, emotional resonance, and focused imagination without immediate reward. This is where power consolidates, as every act of internal work magnifies the seed's potential to manifest. This is why consistency is essential, because repeated nurturing of thoughts and feelings strengthens the vibrational blueprint. This is how faith becomes tangible, the quiet assurance that growth is occurring even without sensory confirmation. This is where insight illuminates, showing that small, unseen shifts in consciousness compound to produce monumental external results. This is why emotional involvement accelerates the process, as feeling energizes the invisible mechanisms of creation. This is how alignment is refined, harmonizing thought, belief, and expectation into a cohesive, fertile force. This is where resilience is forged, maintaining focus and trust despite delays or apparent inactivity. This is the subtle revelation that invisible work is both the foundation and engine of every manifestation. This is how attention gains significance, as every conscious choice shapes the inner soil. This is why internal evidence must be observed. Recognizing micro-confirmations reinforces confidence. This is how mastery over inner processes precedes mastery over outer circumstances. This is where the viewer begins to perceive creation as an ongoing, deliberate act rather than random happenstance. And this is the moment when invisible labor is recognized as the essential force that guarantees the eventual harvest. Envision a world where every thought, feeling, and action moves in harmony toward the reality you wish to experience. This is how it unfolds, as alignment ensures that your inner state becomes a coherent signal, attracting circumstances that reflect your deepest assumptions. This is where clarity deepens, because misalignment dilutes the creative energy and delays manifestation. This is why it matters, for consistent internal agreement accelerates the natural flow from seed time to harvest. This is the turning point, where attention, emotion, and imagination converge into a single potent current of creation. This is how subtle mastery emerges, as you learn to detect even minor contradictions and gently restore harmony. This is why focus becomes magnetic, concentrating energy precisely where it produces tangible results. This is where resilience strengthens, maintaining inner coherence despite external noise or apparent delays. This is how trust flourishes, as the mind recognizes that aligned desires are inevitably realized. This is why emotional congruence is essential, each feeling reflecting the reality assumed internally. This is how subtle evidence begins to appear, small synchronicities confirming the power of alignment. This is where discipline takes root, refining mental and emotional patterns to sustain harmony. This is the quiet revelation that inner alignment is not an occasional act, but a continuous practice of conscious stewardship. This is how energy flows effortlessly, magnetizing opportunities and resources that support manifestation. This is why patience becomes active, nurturing the inner state until the outer world mirrors it. This is how the viewer begins to perceive alignment as the operating system of creation. This is where imagination, assumption, and feeling fuse into a seamless force. This is why mastery depends on sustained internal coherence. This is how abundance moves from potential to certainty. And this is the step where alignment ensures that every subsequent seed planted grows into its full, inevitable harvest. Can you imagine noticing subtle hints of your desires before they appear fully in reality? This is how it unfolds, as early signs and synchronicities act like tiny ripples on the surface of a pond, revealing the unseen growth beneath. This is where awareness sharpens, because recognizing these indicators strengthens faith and reinforces the inner assumption. This is why it matters. For small confirmations validate the invisible process and prevent doubt from disrupting momentum. This is the turning point, where observation becomes an active tool in guiding and energizing manifestation. This is how mastery emerges, as the mind begins to track and interpret evidence with precision. This is why focus becomes critical, each acknowledgement of subtle progress reinforcing alignment and expectation. This is where insight grows, teaching that the harvest always begins internally and manifests gradually in the outer world. This is why emotional engagement amplifies these signs, as gratitude and anticipation deepen the vibrational resonance of the assumed reality. This is how patience gains meaning. Observing early cues allows you to remain calm and confident while the full manifestation develops. This is the subtle revelation, that even minor coincidences or intuitive nudges are proof of the blueprint unfolding. This is how alignment solidifies, as noticing evidence reinforces the coherence between thought, feeling, and imagination. This is why internal vigilance is vital, as missing or dismissing signs can delay conscious recognition of the harvest. This is how momentum builds, each subtle confirmation magnetizing larger events toward manifestation. This is where trust matures, understanding that visible results are inevitable when internal conditions are met. This is why the viewer begins to see life as a responsive canvas, reflecting the inner state continuously. This is how subtle evidence bridges imagination with reality. And this is the step where recognizing early signs ensures that faith, focus, and assumption remain unshaken as the harvest draws near. Picture for a moment the moment when your desires begin to materialize. This is how it unfolds, as the act of recognizing and celebrating even the smallest manifestations amplifies the magnetic force behind your seeds. This is where awareness deepens, because gratitude transforms the harvest from mere occurrence into conscious participation. This is why it matters, for acknowledging the bounty reinforces the alignment between inner assumption and outer reality. This is the turning point, where appreciation becomes a tool of creation, accelerating the flow of abundance. This is how mastery emerges, learning to feel joy for what is already present while maintaining focus on the completed desire. This is why attention to detail strengthens the effect. Noticing even minor wins creates a compound effect in consciousness. This is where subtle power operates, as the emotional resonance of gratitude energizes unseen seeds. This is why alignment becomes effortless, for the inner state of appreciation harmonizes thought, feeling, and expectation. This is how patience gains a new dimension, enjoying the process while trusting the timing of full manifestation. This is the quiet revelation that the act of gratitude itself is a form of watering and nurturing the seeds already planted. This is how focus sharpens, each acknowledgement of abundance reinforcing the inevitability of the full harvest. This is where trust deepens. Seeing the connection between inner feeling and outer results strengthens belief. This is why emotional congruence becomes a superpower, sustaining resonance with the fulfilled desire. This is how the blueprint continues to unfold, translating internal alignment into tangible outcomes. This is where the viewer begins to perceive gratitude not as reaction, but as a proactive tool in conscious creation. This is why abundance multiplies, each expression of appreciation expanding the energy field of manifestation. And this is the step where recognizing and celebrating the harvest ensures continuous growth and deeper fulfillment in every aspect of life. Think of the moments when distraction, doubt, or impatience threaten to derail your progress. This is how it unfolds, as awareness of common pitfalls allows you to intervene before they stunt the growth of your inner seeds. This is where insight sharpens, because recognizing obstacles in advance gives you the power to maintain alignment and momentum. This is why it matters, for even small lapses in focus or emotional congruence can slow manifestation and dilute results. This is the turning point, where conscious vigilance transforms potential setbacks into opportunities for strengthening discipline. This is how mastery emerges, as repeated practice of avoiding pitfalls reinforces mental clarity and consistency. This is why attention becomes vital, each moment spent on deliberate focus protecting the seed from competing influences. This is where subtle power consolidates, ensuring that alignment between thought, feeling, and assumption remains undisturbed. This is how patience and trust are maintained, as awareness of potential obstacles prevents reactive interference. This is why consistency matters. Sustaining habits of imagination, feeling, and visualization prevents regression. This is how internal evidence guides action. Small confirmations indicating that attention remains properly directed. This is the quiet revelation that pitfalls are never final unless given energy and recognition. This is how resilience grows, bouncing back from minor distractions with renewed focus and emotional equilibrium. This is why emotional discipline is crucial, as unmanaged feelings can sabotage progress silently. This is where subtle mastery shines, learning to preemptively counter doubts, fears, and contradictions. This is how the blueprint remains intact, allowing the harvest to proceed unimpeded. This is why the viewer begins to perceive setbacks as temporary ripples rather than threats to creation. This is the step where vigilance and proactive alignment ensure the integrity of the inner work. And this is how the seeds of imagination continue to grow into a full, unstoppable harvest. Envision a world where every thought, feeling, and assumption is consciously cultivated to produce abundance. This is how it unfolds, as mastering seed time and harvest transforms life into a deliberate act of creation rather than a series of random events. This is where understanding crystallizes, because every internal adjustment, every focused visualization, and every sustained feeling contributes to an inevitable outer manifestation. This is why it matters, for the blueprint of abundance is always active, waiting only for conscious participation to unlock its full potential. This is the turning point, where awareness of inner processes replaces reliance on external circumstances. This is how subtle mastery emerges, learning to orchestrate imagination, emotion, and assumption into a seamless creative force. This is why attention becomes sacred, directing energy toward desired outcomes with precision and consistency. This is where patience gains power, allowing the unseen work to mature fully before visible results appear. This is how alignment solidifies, ensuring that internal congruence magnetizes opportunities, resources, and events into reality. This is why emotional resonance amplifies creation, as feeling the fulfilled desire strengthens the vibrational blueprint. This is where insight deepens, revealing that abundance is not earned but awakened through conscious cultivation. This is how subtle evidence reinforces trust, small signs confirming the inner work is taking root. This is why visualization and imagination remain essential, shaping reality before the harvest manifests externally. This is how internal discipline guarantees continuity, preventing doubt, distraction, and contradiction from weakening the blueprint. This is where mastery converges, integrating patience, focus, feeling, and assumption into a unified, unstoppable force. This is why the viewer begins to perceive life as a responsive reflection of inner cultivation. This is how trust in the process grows, knowing the harvest will unfold according to the seeds intentionally sown. This is where gratitude and recognition amplify results, nurturing further abundance. This is the subtle revelation that the journey itself is both the seed time and the ongoing harvest. And this is the moment when the viewer fully grasps Neville's blueprint, empowered to consciously create, sustain, and celebrate the life they imagine.